This is Shaktice Castle in Slovakia. For 20 years, it was home to the most sadistic woman who ever lived. Inside these walls, she tortured and murdered over 600 young women. Her name was Elizabeth Bathory, and she didn't kill for power or money or revenge. She killed because she believed that bathing in virgin blood would keep her young forever. This is the story of how beauty became a weapon of mass destruction. Elizabeth Bathory was born in 1560 into one of the most powerful families in Hungary. She had everything: wealth, beauty, noble blood. But her family had a dark secret. The Bathory family tree was twisted with madness. Her uncle was a devil worshipper. Her aunt was a bisexual sadist. Her brother was a known psychopath. Elizabeth grew up watching torture as entertainment. At 15, she was married to Ferenc Nadezhdy, a man so brutal in warfare they called him the Black Knight. He taught her new methods of torture, turning cruelty into an art form. But Ferenc died in 1604, leaving Elizabeth alone with her castle, her servants, and an insatiable hunger for inflicting pain. That's when the real horror began. It started with servant girls, young peasant women who worked in the castle. They began disappearing, one by one. Elizabeth's method was precise. She would lure young women to the castle with promises of work as servants. Once inside, they never left. She had a torture chamber built in the castle basement. Iron maidens, spike-covered cages, devices designed specifically for prolonged agony. But Elizabeth's favorite weapon was simpler: her own hands and teeth. Witnesses described seeing her bite chunks of flesh from victims' faces and arms. She would heat metal and press it into their skin. She froze naked girls in the snow and poured water over them until they became living ice sculptures. But the most disturbing part wasn't the torture. It was what she did with the blood. Elizabeth believed that bathing in virgin blood would preserve her youth and beauty. She would drain her victims and soak in their blood like a bath. She drank it. She rubbed it into her skin. For 20 years this continued. Hundreds of young women vanished into Shaktice Castle. But Elizabeth made one fatal mistake. By 1610, Elizabeth was running out of peasant girls, so she decided to target noble daughters, young women from wealthy families who could afford to send their daughters for education at the castle. But when noble girls started disappearing, powerful families began asking questions. Unlike peasant families, these people had connections, resources, and the ear of the king. King Matthias II ordered an investigation. On December 30th, 1610, soldiers stormed Shaktice Castle. What they found was beyond their worst nightmares. Bodies in various stages of decomposition, torture victims still alive but barely recognizable as human, a girl drained of blood, still warm. The basement was described as a scene from hell itself. Elizabeth was arrested immediately. During the trial, over 300 witnesses testified against her. The court heard testimony of torture so extreme that even hardened medieval judges were sickened. Her complicits confessed under torture to helping murder 650 young women over 2 decades. But Elizabeth never stood trial herself. Because Elizabeth was nobility, she couldn't be executed. Instead, she received a punishment that matched her crimes. She was walled up alive in her own castle. They bricked up the windows and doors of her chamber, leaving only a small slot for food. Elizabeth Bathory, the woman who bathed in blood to stay young forever, was buried alive at age 50. She died 4 years later in 1614, alone in the darkness, having become the very thing she feared most: old, forgotten, and powerless.
Elizabeth Bathory's name was forbidden to be spoken in Hungary for centuries. Her castle was abandoned and fell to ruins, but her story survived as a warning. She remains the most prolific female serial killer in recorded history, a woman so consumed by vanity that she turned beauty into a weapon of mass murder. Sometimes the real monsters aren't hiding under our beds. They're hiding behind beautiful faces and noble titles. What other dark stories from history should we uncover? Subscribe to Ancient Echoes Tales and let me know in the comments.